You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 117. You're going to die. Today, we're going to talk about how embracing the inevitable fact that we're all going to die works together with our efforts to increase our longevity to make our lives better today and 30 years from now. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend. Welcome to today's episode. I am so happy that you're here. I hope you're having a great September. It's almost over. I love this time of year so much. It's almost October, which is my favorite month, and also a good time to talk about death. How is your unflyable plane? Have you thought about how a checklist might help save you from ineptitude? Did you download your free checklist making checklist at healthcourage.ck.page/checklist? Better get on it. Today, we're going to start out on April 14th, 1865. There was a little theater in Washington, D.C. called Ford's Theater that had only been open for about 2 years, so still nice and new inside. They were putting on a play that night called Our American Cousin, and the president, Abraham Lincoln, decided to attend. He was watching the play from his private theater box when, a little after 10 o'clock p.m., John Wilkes Booth fired a bullet at point-blank range into Lincoln's head near his left ear. The poor president was paralyzed and barely breathing for about 9 hours, but doctors were not able to save him. He died the morning of April 15th. Of course, Lincoln's assassination was a horrible tragedy and major headline news. It was also a big turning point in the mindsets of a great deal of the world. From whenever humans started existing until April 15th, 1865, part of life was death. If your family member died, you would keep them at home on a bed or a table until you had dug a grave for them. Their dead body would be part of your household for a day or however long it was until you were ready to bury them. Death wasn't a far-removed concept. It was part of the human experience. But Abraham Lincoln was the most public figure to have a brand new post-mortem procedure called embalming. This allowed 25 million Americans to attend memorial services for him on April 19th. 600 people attended his actual funeral proceedings. His body lay in state in the United States Capitol Rotunda and then went on kind of a tour through the country until it was buried in Springfield, Illinois on May 4th, 1865. 19 days after he died. You would not leave a body unburied for almost 3 weeks at any previous point in history, other than the special processes in ancient Egypt to mummify people. The newspapers described this new embalming procedure, and people were enthralled. Embalming started to become a hot new late 1860s trend, like crinolines for women, those hoop cage things that kept your skirt full. I think those things look cool, and I think it'd be fun to try one on, but apparently thousands of women died from them. They easily caught fire and you couldn't get away from them. Horrible. Do you ever wonder what it would be like for a woman from that time period to spend a day in the clothes we wear now? This is one of the things I think of often. I don't know why. Clothes swaps. If you were used to wearing a corset and or crinoline and button-up boots, and then you spent some time in what I'm wearing right now, which is Fabletics leggings, zero shoes, and a technical t-shirt, it would be pretty wild. Okay, so back to death. Once embalming became more common, the way society interacted with death shifted. Now we could hold it at a distance, avoid it to a certain extent. I can see that. It feels way more comfortable to never have to really think about it. One study says that 8 out of 10 Westerners describe themselves as very uncomfortable with death. We all intellectually know that our lives will come to an end at some point, but 80% of us don't really want to ever think about it. We also all know that as long as that doesn't happen, we'll keep getting older. As a healthspan coach, I spend a lot of time learning and teaching things that help keep us younger for longer. I love it. It makes me so happy. I think there is so much we can do to prevent and or delay a huge amount of the chronic diseases of aging, and that our lives will be better for it. So much suffering could be prevented with an intelligent, preemptive plan. I absolutely think we should all have a personal plan to make sure the odds are ever in our favor, if you will. We can never be certain what in the world might happen to us, but we can definitely affect the odds, decrease our chances of cardiovascular disease, dementia, cancer, osteoporosis, frailty, even chronic pain. You having more life in your years is important to me. We can also increase our chances of having more years in our life, putting off death for a little bit longer. It's fun. There are all kinds of hacks and tools and programs and procedures. Like I said, I love it all. But as we learn and implement this fun stuff, I think it's important to sit back and really think about why we're doing any of these things. I think it's possible to get super into trying to Benjamin Button yourself younger, which can be great, and I'm here to help you do that. But some people might do these things as a means of trying to run away from death. They're drawn to these modalities as completely subconscious ways of denying the fact that they're going to die someday. Eventually, their life will be over, and whatever they did or didn't do with the time they had while they were here will end. They'll have to cash in their chips, and they aren't ready to. I mean, who is, especially at our ages? But I don't think you'll be doing yourself any favors if your reason for juicing celery or getting in a cryotherapy chamber or taking the stairs is some kind of subconscious denial of your own mortality. Something that I think is funny is that even though it's much more comfortable, the more we deny the reality of our own impending death, the more unhappy we are. So even though it's all under the surface, hidden stuff, living healthfully now is a lot more fun if we make those healthy sacrifices now, knowing full well that we're gonna die anyway, and it could be tomorrow. We talked a little about this in episode 99 about comfort too, but there was a study done by scientists at the University of Kentucky. They had one group of people think about a painful visit to the dentist and the other contemplate their own death. Both unpleasant things to think about. The death thinkers afterward encountered a newfound perspective. They reported being more happy and more fulfilled in life afterward. The dentist thinkers had no change. So my theory here is that if you make healthy changes from a subconscious paradigm of trying to avoid death or deny its inevitability, you'll be more comfortable and less happy. What do you think? Existential philosopher Martin Heidegger said, "If I take death into my life, acknowledge it, and face it squarely, I will free myself from the anxiety of death and the pettiness of life, and only then will I be free to become myself." End quote. How might you face death in order to free yourself from the anxiety of death and still live differently than most people so that you live longer than most people and or have more of your years be lived in excellent health? Do you feel like the things you do to age well would still be worth it if you ended up being hit and killed by a self-driving car 3 years from now? If not, what would you do differently now? Are you putting off something more important than meal prepping? Hey, I wanted to briefly interrupt to ask if you're curious about female bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, the kind that's usually started around the time of perimenopause. What it is, what it does, how it works, what it's like. If so, you should check out my Udemy course called The Basics of Female Bioidentical Hormone Replacement Therapy. The course goes over the pros and cons of using hormone treatment, which hormones are usually included with BHRT, how they're used, the lab tests that are used, some tips for finding a prescriber in pharmacy to work with, and how to develop a rough estimate of how much BHRT will cost you. If you've been wondering whether bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is right for you, it's time to close that open loop, stop wondering, and move forward with confidence. Enroll in my course today. As a listener of the podcast, you can get a special discount for the very best price. It's a no-brainer. I would just tell you the coupon code, but Udemy makes me change it every month. So check the show notes or go to www.healthcouragecollective.com/Udemy to find the special podcast listener discount code that's only for awesome people like you. Okay, back to the episode. In his book, The Comfort Crisis, Michael Easter says, many of us are so unaware of our impending death that we forget to live true to ourselves, which is the most common regret of Americans on their deathbeds. End quote. If you embrace the discomfort of pondering your own death, you'll be more aware of the impermanence of life, which makes you happier and more grateful. Embracing life's only guarantee is what helps you become free to be yourself and actually live your life while you have the chance. So I hope as you architect your intelligent plan to age like a professional that you're doing it in a way that frees you to become more you. That you'll choose things that help you live your life more while you have the chance, rather than things that suck the fun out of your days in an effort to deny the fact that someday you're going to run out of days. I am all for healthy changes. I'm all about all the things, but I think it's important to evaluate whether you're using healthy interventions as an excuse to run away from the fact that your life is going to end someday, and maybe you're not being who you really want to be or doing what is deeply important to you. Apparently, in the glory days of the Roman Empire, with all the opulence and fanfare, when a huge crowd would gather to cheer on a victorious general, he, if he was one of the wise, stoically trained Roman generals, would make sure to have an advisor with him whose job it was to notice that the general was basking in the adoration of the throngs of people and lean forward and whisper, "Memento mori." Gold star, if you know what that means. It's not "you're amazing" or some kind of affirmation that his position was ordained by God like medieval European monarchs did. Memento mori means remember death. Remembering that he was going to die at some point helped keep everything in perspective. The fanfare and the petty squabbles and obsessions with material things all became more clearly silly when you think about the fact that you're going to die someday. Memento mori. Good stuff. There's a modern-day Stoic philosopher named Ryan Holiday. He is awesome. I highly recommend him and his books and everything about him. He sells a coin on his website called the Memento Mori Medallion that you can keep in your pocket to always remember death. My heroic coach accountability partner has one and likes to use Memento Mori as a daily or more than once a day kind of practice. We've talked about it several times in the past, so I asked him in preparation for this episode how Memento Mori affects his life. He said it is huge. He texted back, "Yes, I have goals like I would like to have a successful coaching business, but if I died today without that, but my son knew that he was loved, that's a win." And I totally agree. As your healthspan coach, I love for you to have goals, to know what you want when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, and the specific, very best things to do now to make sure that that happens. It's so, so great. But I don't want you to be focused on those things, because that way you don't have to acknowledge the fact that you're not living up to the person you really want to be. And someday your number is going to be called and you'll have run out of chances. Our longevity here in the Health Courage Collective isn't about pushing your dreams further down the road in hopes that you'll have more time to start closing the gap between who you're capable of being and who you're actually being 30 years from now. It's about being your best self today and growing your capacity to live even bigger in the future. You're going to die someday. It could be tomorrow. I very much hope not, but you never know. Most people slowly stop living before they die. I want you to be physiologically capable of living even more until then. Not because you're running away from death, but because you're dancing toward it. If you were to die tomorrow or in a month or a year, would you feel like you were who you most wanted to be? If not, what haven't you done? How can you take a small step in that direction right now? One tiny thing you could do today that would make you feel like you're living true to that value. I know people always say that nobody on their deathbed wishes they had spent more time at work or driven a more expensive car. Do you think if you were to die before you got the chance to grow old, that you would wish that you had eaten more fast food or spent more time being sedentary? Maybe. If so, you might need some more deep thinking time. That's okay. I don't think I would regret doing what I could to give my body the best chance I could to thrive for many decades to come if, in the end, those decades were taken away. It's a weird game of infinite possibilities we play, isn't it? This thing we call life. So many things could happen, so many paths we could go down, so many results we could end up with, and all of them are uncertain but one. But we can stack the deck in our favor and push the odds toward having more years lived in good health if we pick our highest leverage behaviors and get 100% consistent executing them. And those can be the very things that help us feel fulfilled and like we're living true to what matters most to us. Like if we died tomorrow, at least we gave it everything we had. I love British author G.K. Chesterson's quote, "Life is not only a pleasure, but a kind of eccentric privilege." I hope as you go about your days that you find pleasure in doing the things that are best for you, and that you realize you can create for yourself the most eccentric privilege there is. Feeling energetic, strong, and sharp in your later decades, all while remembering that someday you're going to die. If you found this or any other episode of this podcast helpful, I would be so grateful if you shared it with someone you think might appreciate it. You are awesome. As always, I'm here to get you on track with your aging plan. I'll also link to a free resource I made that'll help you get clear about what you want the end of your life to be like. Or if you haven't written your own eulogy or obituary yet, that's something I absolutely think you should do. Send it to me at healthcouragecollective@gmail.com if you're feeling brave. I would love to see what you come up with. Next week, we're going to talk about what to manage instead of, or maybe before, managing your time. When you can get it right, all of the things you need to get done feel like so much less of a struggle. Until then, don't use healthy behaviors to run away from the uncomfortable truth that you're going to die. And don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.